Emily Carter never imagined that serving coffee to a stranger would destroy everything she thought she knew about safety, trust, and love. The man in black didn't just walk into her life, he orchestrated it. By the time she discovered the hidden file with her name on it, photographs dating back months, detailed notes about her routines, she was already living in his fortress, already tangled in his world of violence and power. The question that shattered her wasn't whether he was dangerous. It was whether anything between them had ever been real. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Aegean wind carried the scent of salt and jasmine through the narrow streets of Oia, but Emily Carter barely noticed anymore. Beauty had become background noise when you were exhausted enough. She moved through the cramped kitchen of Helios Taverna with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had learned to conserve every ounce of energy, her white shirt sticking to her back in the oppressive August heat, her feet aching in shoes held together more by habit than structural integrity. "Table 7 needs water," Costas barked from the grill, his Greek accent thick with irritation. "And table 12 is still waiting for their mezzes." Emily grabbed the pitcher without responding, her jaw tight. 6 months ago, she'd stepped off a plane in Athens with a backpack and $2,000, convinced that running away to Greece would somehow fix the hollow feeling that had followed her through her entire 26 years in Columbus, Ohio. She'd imagined whitewashed buildings and philosophical conversations at sunset, maybe a romance with someone who appreciated poetry and authenticity. Instead, she'd found Costas, who paid her under the table and treated her like an appliance. She'd found a tiny room above a closed ceramics shop that smelled like mildew and cigarettes. She'd found that running away didn't fix anything. It just gave your problems better scenery. The afternoon shift was the worst. The lunch rush had ended, but dinner was still hours away, leaving a strange liminal space where time seemed to thicken and slow. Most of the tables sat empty, their blue checkered cloths fluttering in the breeze. A few tourists lingered over their Greek salads, taking photos of the caldera view that stretched beyond the terrace. The volcanic cliffs dropping away into impossibly blue water, the white buildings of Santorini cascading down the hillside like sugar cubes tumbling toward the sea. Emily had stopped seeing it weeks ago. Now it was just the backdrop to her exhaustion. She was refilling water glasses at table 7 when she noticed him. He sat alone at table 1, the best table in the restaurant, the corner spot where the terrace jutted out farthest over the cliff, offering an unobstructed view of the caldera and the sunset that would paint the sky in a few hours. Costas usually reserved it for large parties or couples celebrating anniversaries, people who would order expensive wine and leave generous tips. But this man sat alone. He wore black despite the heat, black pants, black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, black sunglasses that concealed his eyes. His dark hair was cut short, precise. He didn't look at the view. He didn't look at his phone. He simply sat with an absolute stillness that felt intentional, controlled, like a predator conserving energy between hunts. Emily felt something shift in her chest, a flutter of awareness that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with recognition. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where you learned to read danger, to sense when someone didn't belong, when the normal rules might not apply. This man radiated that same quality, not threat exactly, but potential, like a gun sitting on a table, harmless until it wasn't. "Emily!" Costas's voice snapped her attention back. "Table 1, now!" She grabbed her order pad and crossed the terrace, her pulse inexplicably quickening. Up close, she could see he was younger than his stillness suggested. Mid-30s, maybe, with the kind of face that would photograph well but felt somehow too controlled in person. Sharp jawline, olive skin, a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His hands rested on the table, perfectly still. He wore a watch that probably cost more than she'd earned in the past 6 months. "Welcome to Helios," Emily said, falling into her server voice. Pleasant, efficient, forgettable. "Can I start you with something to drink?" He turned his head toward her, and even though she couldn't see his eyes behind the dark glasses, she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. For a long moment, he didn't speak, just studied her in a way that made her skin prickle with awareness. "What do you recommend?" His voice was low, slightly accented. Italian, maybe, though his English was perfect. "The house wine is good, red or white, depending on what you're eating." "I'm not asking about the wine." He tilted his head slightly. "I'm asking what you would drink if you could choose anything on the menu." The question caught her off guard. Customers didn't usually acknowledge that she might have preferences, that she existed beyond her function. I don't drink on shift, but if you did. Emily hesitated, thrown by the sudden shift from transaction to conversation. The Acertico. It's a white wine from the island. Crisp, mineral, tastes like it grew out of volcanic rock. A smile ghosted across his mouth, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Then I'll have that. And whatever food pairs well with it. The grilled octopus is excellent, or the sea bass. You choose. Another small disruption in the normal script. Emily scribbled a note she didn't need. Her hand wanted something to do. I'll put in for the octopus. Anything else? Yes. He leaned back in his chair, that absolute stillness settling over him again. Sit with me for a moment. I'm working. I can see that. I'm asking anyway. Emily glanced over her shoulder. Costas was busy at the grill, and the other tables were empty or self-sufficient. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea, that men who sat alone in expensive black clothes and made strange requests were exactly the kind of complication she should avoid. But something else stirred beneath the warning, a curiosity she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. When was the last time anyone had really looked at her, really seen her as something more than a means to an end? 2 minutes, she said, and immediately regretted it. She pulled out the chair across from him, acutely aware of how she must look. Hair escaping from its ponytail, shirt wrinkled, the cheap bracelet she wore from a street vendor in Fira. He, meanwhile, looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread on masculine elegance. You're American, he said. Not a question. Ohio. You're Italian. Among other things? He reached up and removed his sunglasses, and Emily's breath caught. His eyes were dark, almost black, with an intensity that felt invasive. They didn't just look at her, they studied her, catalogued her, stripped away the server persona to examine what lay beneath. What brings you to Santorini? Work, obviously. That's what keeps you here, not what brought you. The distinction was subtle but sharp. Emily felt exposed in a way she didn't like. I needed a change, somewhere different. Running toward something or away from it? Does it matter? It does if you're still trying to figure out which one it is. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Emily shifted in her chair, suddenly wanting to end this conversation. I should get your order in. Not yet. He leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. Tell me something true. Excuse me? Something real. Not the story you tell tourists or yourself. Something true about why you're here, working yourself to exhaustion in a restaurant where the owner doesn't even know your last name. Anger flared hot in Emily's chest. You don't know anything about me. I know you're educated. The way you speak, the vocabulary you use, college, probably a good one. I know you're running from something that hurt you badly enough to cross an ocean. I know you're lonely because you agreed to sit with a stranger when you should have walked away. He paused. And I know that right now you feel more alive than you have in months because someone finally noticed you exist. Emily's hands clenched in her lap. She should stand up. She should tell him to go to hell. Instead, she heard herself say, You're very sure of yourself. I'm observant. There's a difference. Most people would call that arrogant. Most people are afraid of being seen. His eyes held hers. You're not most people, Emily. The sound of her name in his mouth sent a shiver down her spine. I didn't tell you my name. It's on your tag. He nodded toward the small plastic rectangle pinned to her shirt. Of course. She felt foolish for the spike of alarm. Well, you have me at a disadvantage, then. Dante, he said. Dante Cavalli. The name meant nothing to her, but the way he offered it felt significant, like he was giving her something valuable. Is that supposed to mean something? Not yet. He glanced toward the kitchen, where Costas was starting to look their way with a frown. You should go before your employer decides I'm keeping you from your work. Emily stood, her legs unsteady. Your food will be out soon. I'm not here for the food. Then why? I wanted to meet you. He put his sunglasses back on, returning to that impenetrable stillness. Thank you for indulging me. Emily retreated to the kitchen, her pulse hammering. The entire conversation had lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt like something had shifted, like a door she hadn't known existed had cracked open. What did he want? Costas demanded. The Acertico and the grilled octopus. He talked to you that whole time about food? Emily shrugged, keeping her expression neutral. Some people are chatty. She put in the order and threw herself into the mechanical tasks of service, refilling drinks, clearing plates, running food. But her awareness kept returning to table 1, to the man who sat motionless while other diners came and went, who barely touched his wine or his food, but seemed content to simply occupy the space. When she brought his check 2 hours later, he signed it without looking and left cash that included a tip 3 times the cost of the meal. "Thank you," Emily said automatically. Dante stood, adjusting his shirt cuffs with precise movements. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and bergamot. "I'll be back tomorrow. We're open for lunch and dinner. I'll be back for you." He said it simply, as fact rather than flirtation. "Good evening, Emily." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing down the narrow street toward the parking area. Emily stood holding the check, her hands trembling slightly. Costas materialized beside her, snatching the bill. His eyes widened when he saw the tip. "What did you do?" "Nothing. Just served him." "Men don't tip like that for nothing." Costas's expression turned calculating. "He's coming back?" "That's what he said." "Good. You serve him again, whatever he wants." He pocketed the cash, leaving Emily her standard share, barely a fraction of what Dante had actually left. "Maybe we get more customers like him." Emily wanted to argue, to point out that the tip had been for her, not the restaurant. But she'd learned months ago that fighting with Costas was pointless. She simply nodded and returned to clearing tables. That night, in her tiny room above the ceramics shop, Emily lay awake listening to the sounds of Oya settling into its evening rhythm, distant music from the bars in Fira, the occasional motorbike, the wind rattling her loose window frame. She kept replaying the conversation, analyzing each exchange. "I'm not here for the food. I wanted to meet you. I'll be back for you." She should be worried. Everything about Dante Cavalli screamed complication, danger, the kind of involvement that would only make her already messy life messier. The smart thing would be to ask Costas to assign him to another server, to avoid whatever this was before it became something. But Emily was so tired of being smart, of being invisible, of moving through her days like a ghost haunting her own life. For 3 minutes this afternoon, someone had looked at her and really seen her, had spoken to her like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings were worth the effort of excavation. She wanted more of that. God help her, she wanted it desperately. The next afternoon, Dante returned. Emily spotted him from the kitchen, watching as he claimed the same table with the same quiet authority. He wore different clothes, dark gray today instead of black, but the same quality of stillness, the same sense of controlled power. Costas practically shoved her toward the terrace. "Go, make him happy." Emily approached with her order pad and professional smile, determined to maintain better boundaries. "Welcome back. Would you like—" "When does your shift end?" Dante interrupted. "I'm sorry?" "Your shift. When are you finished working?" Emily glanced around, aware of other diners watching with open curiosity. "That's not really— 6 o'clock? 7? Around 8, but have dinner with me." The request, or was it a command, hit her like cold water. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I don't know you, because this is weird, because—" She lowered her voice, leaning closer. "Because men who dress like you and tip like you and show up 2 days in a row for waitresses they just met are either dangerous or crazy, and I'm not interested in finding out which." Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, amusement maybe, or approval. "Those are reasonable concerns. Then you understand why I'm saying no." "I understand why you think you should say no." He leaned back in his chair. "But you're not going to." The arrogance should have infuriated her. Instead, Emily felt that same dangerous flutter of interest. "You're very confident. You spent all night thinking about our conversation. You're curious about why I came back, about what I want, about whether you imagined the connection or if it was real." His voice dropped lower. "You're bored and lonely and tired of being invisible. I'm offering you one evening where you don't have to be any of those things." Every word landed true, and Emily hated him a little for it. "You don't know anything about me." "Then have dinner with me and prove me wrong." She should walk away. She should tell him to leave and never come back. Instead, she heard herself say, "Where?" "There's a villa. Cliffside, private, spectacular view." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. A stunning white structure cascading down volcanic rock, infinity pool glowing blue against the sunset. My driver will pick you up at 8:30. That's your house? One of them. The casual wealth in that statement should have been a red flag. Emily looked at the photo, then at Dante, then back at the photo. If I agree to this, I'm driving myself. I'm not getting in a car with your driver. Fair enough. I'll text you the address. I didn't give you my number. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from handsome to devastating. Not yet, but you will. Emily pulled out her phone before she could overthink it and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she felt that touch all the way to her spine. Dante entered his number and texted himself, then handed it back. 8:30, he said. Don't be late. I haven't said yes yet. You will. He stood and walked away without ordering anything, leaving Emily alone at the table with her heart pounding and her better judgment screaming warnings she was already committed to ignoring. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She moved through the motions automatically, her mind already racing ahead to 8:30, to the villa, to whatever was about to happen. Hostess kept shooting her suspicious glances, clearly aware that something had shifted but unable to pin down what. At 8:15, Emily stood in her tiny bathroom, staring at her reflection with growing panic. She'd showered and changed into her only decent dress, a simple navy blue cotton thing she'd bought in Athens, slightly wrinkled from being crammed in her small closet. Her hair fell in damp waves around her shoulders. She had minimal makeup, no jewelry beyond her cheap bracelet, shoes that were presentable but far from elegant. She looked exactly like what she was, a broke American waitress playing dress-up. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dante's number. The address is waiting in your maps. Take your time. No pressure. No reminder of the time. Just patience. Somehow that steadied her. Emily grabbed her bag, checked that she had her phone and her pepper spray she'd bought it her first week in Greece, a paranoid purchase that suddenly seemed prescient, and headed down to the street where her borrowed scooter waited. One of the other servers, Maria, had loaned it to her months ago. It was old and temperamental, but it ran. The address led her north along the cliff road, away from Oya's tourist center toward the quieter stretches where the wealthy built their private estates. The sun was setting, painting the caldera in shades of gold and rose, the kind of beauty that usually left tourists breathless. Emily barely noticed. The villa appeared around a curve, even more stunning in person than in the photo. White walls and curves that seemed to grow organically from the volcanic rock. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the sunset, terraces cascading down in levels connected by stone stairs. The infinity pool seemed to float in midair, its edge blending seamlessly with the sea beyond. Emily parked her scooter near the entrance, suddenly feeling ridiculous. What was she doing here? This was insane. Before she could spiral further, Dante appeared at the top of the stairs, still dressed in gray, his sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly mussed by the wind. He looked more relaxed than he had at the restaurant, the rigid control softened into something almost approachable. You came, he said, descending to meet her. I'm clearly terrible at making smart decisions. Or excellent at recognizing opportunities. He gestured toward the villa. Come. I promise you're safe here. That's exactly what someone planning to murder me would say. If I wanted to murder you, I wouldn't have invited you somewhere this beautiful, too memorable. Witnesses would recall the American girl on the scooter. The dark humor surprised a laugh out of her. That's reassuring. Dante smiled and offered his hand. Emily looked at it for a long moment, aware that taking it meant crossing a line, committing to whatever this evening would become. Then she reached out and let him lead her up the stairs. The villa's interior matched its exterior, minimalist luxury, all clean lines and natural materials, the volcanic stone left exposed in places, contemporary art on the walls. But what dominated everything was the view. The entire western wall was glass, opening onto a terrace where a table had been set for two, candles already lit despite the lingering daylight. This is incredible, Emily said, unable to hide her awe. I thought you'd appreciate it. You notice beauty even when you're too exhausted to enjoy it. Dante led her to the terrace. Wine? Are you trying to get me drunk? I'm trying to help you relax. There's a difference. Emily accepted the glass, the same Assyrtiko she'd recommended, she noticed, and took a seat at the table. The view stretched endlessly before them, the caldera darkening to purple as the sun dropped toward the horizon. "So," she said, "do you do this often? Invite strange waitresses to your private villa?" "Never." Dante sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his attention focused. "You're the first." "Should I feel special or worried?" "Both, probably." He sipped his wine. "Tell me about Ohio." "There's not much to tell. Small town, normal family, normal life. Boring." "If it was so normal and boring, why did you leave?" The question touched the wound she'd been avoiding for 6 months. Emily looked out at the water, watching the light shift. "I was engaged. 3 years. We had a plan. House in the suburbs, 2 kids, careers that looked good on paper. Everything sensible and safe." She paused. "Then I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't breathe. Like I was drowning in normal, in safe, in the life everyone expected me to want." "So you left?" "I called off the wedding, quit my job, bought a plane ticket." She laughed without humor. "My mother said I was having a breakdown. My ex said I was being selfish. Maybe they were both right. Or maybe you were brave enough to admit you wanted more than suffocation." Emily looked at him, surprised by the understanding in his voice. "What about you? What's your normal?" "I don't have one." Dante set down his glass. "I move between cities, between countries. I have houses I barely see, business that requires my attention in a dozen different places. Normal would feel like failure." "That sounds lonely." "It is, most of the time." His eyes met hers. "Until yesterday." The statement hung between them, too honest, too raw. Emily's pulse quickened. "Dante, what is this? Really?" "I don't know yet." He leaned forward. "But I want to find out." Before she could respond, someone emerged from inside carrying plates. A woman in her 50s, friendly-faced, who set down their first course with practiced efficiency. She spoke to Dante in rapid Greek, too fast for Emily to follow, then disappeared back inside. "My housekeeper Sophia," Dante explained. "She's convinced I'm wasting away without proper feeding." The food was exquisite, Greek cuisine elevated to art, each course paired perfectly with wine. They talked through the meal, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Dante asked about her life before Greece, and Emily found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone. About her childhood dreams of being a writer, about the slow suffocation of expectations, about the desperate hope that somewhere else she might discover who she actually was. In return, Dante offered carefully curated pieces of himself. He'd grown up in Rome, he said, though his work took him everywhere. He was vague about what that work actually entailed, steering around it with such practiced skill that Emily almost didn't notice the evasions. Almost. "You're very good at talking without saying anything," she observed over dessert. "It's a necessary skill in my line of work." "Which is?" "Complicated." He smiled. "Does it matter?" "I don't know, does it?" Dante studied her for a long moment. "Not tonight. Tonight we're just 2 people who don't want to be alone." It should have bothered her, the deflection, the careful maintenance of mystery. But Emily was tired of being careful, tired of asking the sensible questions. Whatever Dante was hiding, she decided, could wait. After dinner, they moved to the pool terrace, where lounge chairs faced the now dark caldera. Stars scattered across the sky, undimmed by city lights. The air had cooled, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Emily kicked off her shoes and sat at the pool's edge, letting her feet dangle in the warm water. Dante joined her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for tonight. For making me feel like a person again, instead of just a function." "You were never just anything, Emily." His voice was low, intimate. "You're extraordinary. You just forgot for a while." She turned to look at him, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. They were close enough to kiss, close enough that she could see the faint scar tissue around that eyebrow scar, could count his heartbeats in the pulse at his throat. "I should go," she whispered, not moving. "You should," Dante agreed, not moving either. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Emily knew she was standing on a precipice, knew that what happened next would change everything. She leaned in. Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled, and then he kissed her. The world narrowed to the point of contact, his mouth on hers, his hand sliding into her hair, the taste of wine and something darker, more dangerous. Emily felt herself falling, surrendering to something she didn't understand and didn't want to question. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Stay. I can't. You can. The villa has 6 bedrooms. Take your pick. No expectations, no pressure. Just stay. It was reckless. It was probably stupid. But Emily found herself nodding, found herself following him inside, found herself accepting the bedroom he offered with its impossibly soft sheets and its view of the stars. She didn't sleep with him that night. They'd crossed enough lines for one evening, but she lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, her lips still tingling, her heart still racing, and felt something she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. She felt alive. In the morning, Emily woke to sunlight streaming through gauze curtains and the smell of fresh coffee. She found Dante on the terrace, dressed in black again, his phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian in a tone that was all business. When he saw her, his expression softened. He ended the call abruptly. Coffee? He offered. Please. Emily accepted the cup, wrapping her hands around it. In the bright morning light, everything from the previous night felt surreal, like maybe she'd imagined it. I should get back. Not yet. Dante gestured to the table where breakfast waited. Fresh fruit, yogurt, pastries. Eat first. They sat in comfortable silence, the morning stretching golden and warm around them. Emily kept stealing glances at him, trying to reconcile the controlled, intense man from the restaurant with this quieter, almost gentle version. What are you thinking? Dante asked. That I don't understand any of this. You. Why me? What you want. I want to know you. Is that so difficult to believe? Yes, actually. Men who look like you, who live like you. They don't pursue broke waitresses unless they want something. Dante's expression darkened slightly. What do you think I want? I don't know. That's what scares me. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not going to hurt you, Emily. You can't promise that. No, he admitted, but I can promise I'll try not to. It wasn't enough. It was also somehow exactly what she needed to hear, honesty instead of empty reassurances. See me again, Dante said. Tomorrow. Let me take you somewhere. Where? Does it matter? Emily laughed despite herself. You're impossible. I'm determined. There's a difference. He squeezed her hand. Say yes. She should say no. She should thank him for a lovely evening, walk away, go back to her small, safe life of exhaustion and invisibility. She should protect herself from whatever this was before it became something she couldn't control. Instead, she said, yes. Dante's smile was worth every alarm bell. Her common sense was ringing. I'll pick you up at noon. Wear comfortable shoes. He drove her back to Oya on his motorcycle, a sleek black machine that purred like a predator, and Emily felt the stares as they pulled up outside the ceramic shop. She knew what it looked like, knew what conclusions people would draw. She found she didn't care. Until tomorrow, Dante said, and then he was gone, leaving Emily standing in the street with the smell of his cologne still clinging to her dress and the memory of his kiss still burning on her lips. She made it through her shift in a daze, fielding Costas's questions with vague non-answers, ignoring the knowing looks from the other servers. When she finally returned to her room that night, she found a text waiting. I can't stop thinking about you. Emily stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Me neither. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, tomorrow can't come soon enough. Emily set down her phone and touched her fingers to her lips, remembering. Whatever was happening between them, whatever danger it represented, she was already in too deep to care about swimming back to shore. She was falling, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of where she might land. Dante arrived at noon exactly, the motorcycle's engine cutting through the sleepy midday quiet of Oya like a blade through silk. Emily was waiting outside the ceramic shop, dressed in jeans and sneakers as instructed, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying every moment from the villa, every word, every touch. He dismounted with fluid grace, removing his helmet to reveal that devastating smile. Today he wore dark jeans and a white linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up to expose forearms that were more muscular than his tailored clothes had suggested. He looked younger in the bright sunlight, more approachable, though the intensity in his eyes remained unchanged. Ready? He asked, offering her a helmet. You still haven't told me where we're going. I thought you liked surprises. I like knowing I'm not being kidnapped. Dante laughed, a rich sound that made something warm unfurl in Emily's chest. We're going south. There's a place I want to show you, somewhere tourists don't go. Emily took the helmet, her fingers brushing his. Even that small contact sent electricity racing up her arm. And if I hate it? Then I'll bring you back immediately and never bother you again. He paused. But you won't hate it. She climbed onto the bike behind him, her arms wrapping around his waist. The moment felt intimate, her body pressed against his back, her thighs bracketing his hips. Dante's hand covered hers briefly, a squeeze of reassurance, and then they were moving. They rode south along the coastal road, past the crowded beaches of Parissa and Perivolos, past the tourist vans and rental cars. The landscape shifted as they climbed inland. Fewer white buildings, more scrubby vegetation clinging to volcanic soil, ancient stone walls marking property lines that predated any living memory. The air smelled of wild thyme and dust and salt carried on the wind. After 20 minutes, Dante turned onto a narrow dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. Emily tightened her grip as the bike navigated ruts and loose stones, climbing higher until they crested a ridge and the sea appeared below them, impossibly blue against black sand. A small cove nestled at the base of the cliff, accessible only by a steep footpath. No buildings, no people, just pristine beach and crystal water and silence. Dante parked and helped her off the bike. What do you think? It's perfect. Emily stared at the hidden paradise. How did you find this? I make it my business to know the places people overlook. He pulled a backpack from the motorcycle's storage. Come on. The path down was treacherous, loose volcanic rock threatening to slide beneath their feet. Dante moved with the confidence of someone who'd made this climb before, occasionally reaching back to steady Emily when the slope turned steep. His hand was warm and strong, and each time he released her, she felt the absence like a loss. They reached the beach breathless and laughing. The sand was hot beneath Emily's feet when she kicked off her shoes. The cove was smaller than it had appeared from above, a crescent of black sand embraced by volcanic cliffs that blocked it from view on either side. The water was impossibly clear, shifting from turquoise to deep sapphire where the shelf dropped away. Do you come here often? Emily asked. Not as often as I'd like. Dante spread a blanket in the shade of an overhanging rock. But when I need to think, when things get complicated, this is where I come. Why? Because it reminds me that beautiful things can exist without witnesses, that value doesn't require validation. He looked at her directly. Like you. Emily's breath caught. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brilliant and brave and so convinced of your own ordinariness that you can't see how extraordinary you are. He sat on the blanket and patted the space beside him. Tell me what you wanted to be. Before Ohio, and engagement rings and sensible choices. She settled next to him, their shoulders almost touching. The question opened something in her chest, a door she'd kept locked for years. A writer, novels specifically. I had this whole fantasy, coffee shops in Paris, notebooks full of stories, a life built around words and imagination. What stopped you? Reality, practicality. My parents saying writing wasn't a real career. Emily picked up a handful of black sand, letting it slip through her fingers. I got a degree in marketing instead. Got engaged to a man who made sense on paper. Convinced myself that dreams were for children and adults had to be realistic. And now? Now I serve tourists and live in a room that smells like mold and wonder what the hell I'm doing with my life. Dante was quiet for a moment, and when Emily glanced at him, his expression had turned thoughtful, almost sad. Do you still write? No. I left my laptop in Ohio. Thought maybe if I stripped away everything familiar, I'd find something true. Instead, I just found different ways to be lost. You're not lost. You're searching. There's a difference. How can you be so sure? Because I recognize it. He turned to face her fully. I spent years building an empire, accumulating power and wealth, thinking those things would fill the emptiness. They didn't. They just made it echo louder. The raw honesty in his voice surprised her. Then why keep building? Because I don't know how to stop. Because the empire requires feeding, requires constant attention, or it collapses. His jaw tightened. Because walking away would mean admitting I wasted years chasing the wrong thing. Emily reached out before she could think better of it, her hand covering his. What would the right thing look like? Dante's eyes met hers, dark and burning with something that made her pulse stutter. I'm starting to figure that out. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibility. Then Dante stood abruptly, breaking the tension. Come on, the water's perfect. He pulled his shirt over his head in one smooth motion, and Emily's mouth went dry. His torso was a study in controlled strength, lean muscle and olive skin, a few scars crossing his ribs that spoke of violence she didn't want to imagine. He kicked off his shoes and waded into the water without looking back. Emily hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. Her body wasn't magazine perfect, wasn't the sleek elegance that probably populated Dante's usual world. But he was already diving beneath the surface, and the water looked so inviting, and she was tired of hesitation. She stripped down to her underwear and bra, practical cotton, nothing sexy, and ran into the waves before doubt could stop her. The water was shockingly cold at first, then perfect. Emily dove under and surfaced laughing, salt water streaming from her hair. Dante appeared beside her, close enough that their legs tangled beneath the surface. See? Perfect, he said. They swam for an hour, racing to the far edge of the cove and back, diving for smooth stones, floating on their backs while the sun burned overhead. Dante moved through the water like he belonged in it, powerful and graceful, occasionally disappearing beneath the surface only to emerge somewhere unexpected. When they finally returned to the blanket, Emily was exhausted and exhilarated. They lay side by side, drying in the sun, not touching but aware of every inch between them. Thank you, Emily said softly, for this, for reminding me what it feels like to just be. You don't have to thank me. Dante rolled onto his side, propping himself on one elbow. Emily, I need to tell you something. The seriousness in his tone made her stomach clench. That sounds ominous. My life is complicated. The work I do, the world I operate in, it's not simple or safe or anything close to normal. He paused, choosing his words carefully. If we keep seeing each other, things will change. For both of us. Are you trying to warn me off? I'm trying to be honest. You deserve that much. Emily sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees. What exactly do you do, Dante? And don't say it's complicated. Give me something real. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, I broker deals. Between people who can't meet directly, who need intermediaries they can trust. Import, export, logistics. Sometimes the goods are conventional, sometimes they're not. The careful phrasing wasn't lost on her. You're talking about illegal things. I'm talking about operating in gray areas where legality is more flexible than most people imagine. That's a very diplomatic way of saying you're a criminal. Dante's expression didn't change. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll take you back to Oya right now and you'll never see me again. Emily's heart hammered. Every rational instinct screamed that she should do exactly that. Thank him for a lovely day, get on the bike, return to her safe small life. Instead, she heard herself ask, Have you ever hurt anyone? Yes. The blunt honesty was somehow less frightening than a lie would have been. Have you killed anyone? I've given orders that resulted in deaths. Does that count? I think you know it does. Dante sat up slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm not going to lie to you, Emily. I'm not going to pretend I'm something I'm not. My world is dark and dangerous and morally complicated. But I'm also not a monster. I have lines I don't cross. I protect what's mine, and I don't involve innocence. What about me? Am I involved now? Not unless you choose to be. He reached out and tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly tender. But if you choose yes, I'll protect you with everything I have. You'll never have to be invisible again. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face, the sand beneath her, the ghost of his touch still tingling on her skin. She should be terrified. She should run. Instead, all she felt was a strange, reckless certainty. I choose yes, she whispered. When she opened her eyes, Dante's expression had transformed, relief and hunger, and something almost like reverence all mixed together. He cupped her face in both hands and kissed her with an intensity that stole her breath, that promised things she couldn't name but desperately wanted. They stayed at the cove until late afternoon, talking and swimming and learning the landscape of each other's bodies through stolen touches and careful exploration. Dante told her about Rome, about his childhood in a neighborhood where power mattered more than law, about the men who taught him that survival meant being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. Emily told him about Columbus, about a family that loved her but never understood her, about the slow suffocation of being expected to want things she'd never actually chosen. The shadows lengthened and the air cooled, and finally Dante stood, offering his hand. "I should get you back. You have work tonight. I could call in sick. You could, but Costas would give your shifts to someone else, and you need the money." The reminder of her actual life felt jarring after the dreamlike perfection of the day. Emily dressed reluctantly, aware that returning to Oya meant returning to reality, to complications she wasn't ready to face. The ride back was slower, Dante taking the curves with less urgency, like he was trying to stretch out the time they had left. When they finally pulled up outside the ceramics shop, the sun was beginning its descent toward the caldera, painting everything gold. Emily dismounted and handed back the helmet. "When will I see you again?" "Tomorrow, and the day after, and every day you'll let me." Dante pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Move in with me." She laughed, certain he was joking. "That's insane. Why? You hate your apartment. You're barely making enough to survive. I have 6 empty bedrooms and no one to fill them." His expression was serious. "Stay with me, Emily. Let me take care of you while you figure out what comes next." "Dante, we've known each other for 3 days. And in 3 days, you've made me feel more alive than I have in years. Time is just a number. What matters is what we feel." It was too fast, too much, too everything. Emily should say no. She should establish boundaries and be sensible and protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. "Okay," she said instead. Dante's smile was incandescent. "Okay? I'm probably going to regret this. But yes, okay." He kissed her then, right there in the street where anyone could see, his joy evident in every movement. When they finally broke apart, Emily was laughing and breathless and more terrified than she'd ever been. "I'll come by after your shift tonight," Dante said. "We'll get your things." "I don't have many things." "Then it won't take long." He kissed her once more and rode away, leaving Emily standing in the fading light, wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. Her shift passed in a blur. She moved through the mechanical tasks of service while her mind spun with the implications of her decision. She was moving in with a man she barely knew, a man who'd admitted to operating outside the law, who'd confessed to violence as casually as someone else might discuss their accounting job. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt electric, alive with possibility. Costas noticed her distraction and snapped at her twice, but Emily barely registered it. At 11, when the last customers finally left and she'd finished her closing duties, she found Dante waiting outside on his motorcycle. "Ready?" he asked. Emily nodded, too full of nervous energy for words. Her room looked even smaller and shabbier than usual when she unlocked the door. Dante stood in the doorway, taking in the narrow bed, the makeshift desk, the clothes hanging from a wire strung across one corner. "You've been living like this for 6 months?" His voice was tight with something that might have been anger. "It's not that bad. Emily, there's mold on the ceiling. The window doesn't close properly. This isn't living, it's surviving." She felt defensive, embarrassed by how far she'd fallen. "It's what I could afford." Dante crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "You never have to settle for this again. I promise you that." They packed quickly. Emily didn't have much: clothes, a few books, toiletries, the cheap bracelet from Fira. The accumulated detritus of 6 months fit into 2 bags. Looking at her entire life reduced to such a small pile made something ache in Emily's chest. "Is that everything?" Dante asked gently. "That's everything that matters." They left the key on the desk and walked out without looking back. Dante secured her bags to the motorcycle, and then they were riding through the night toward the villa, toward a future Emily couldn't predict but found herself desperate to embrace. The house was dark when they arrived, Sophia having retired for the evening. Dante led Emily to a bedroom different from the one she'd used before, larger, with its own terrace overlooking the caldera, a massive bed draped in white linens, an ensuite bathroom that was bigger than her entire previous room. "This is yours," he said. "Your space. You don't have to share it unless you want to." The careful respect in his voice touched her. "Where's your room?" "Next door." He pointed to a connecting door. "But I'm not assuming anything. This is your choice, Emily. Always your choice." She set down her bags and turned to face him. They stood in the soft lamplight, the space between them charged with possibility. Emily's heart hammered as she reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the scar through his eyebrow. "I choose you," she said quietly. Dante's control cracked. He kissed her with fierce hunger, walking her backward until her legs hit the bed. They fell together onto the soft linens, hands exploring, removing barriers of clothing with urgent need. When he finally slid inside her, Emily gasped at the perfection of it, at how right it felt despite every logical reason it shouldn't. They moved together in the darkness, learning each other's rhythms, each other's breaking points. Dante was alternately gentle and demanding, his control slipping only in the final moments when he buried his face in her neck and shuddered with release. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets, their breathing gradually slowing. Dante traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, his touch possessive and tender at once. "What happens now?" Emily asked softly. "Now you live here. You rest. You write if you want to. You let me take care of you." "I can't just be your kept woman." "I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to stop fighting so hard just to survive that you can't remember what it's like to actually live." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Write your stories, Emily. Let me handle everything else." It should have felt wrong, being offered such security by someone she barely knew. Instead, it felt like finally being able to breathe after months underwater. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Okay." She fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer than she had in longer than she could remember. The next morning, Emily woke alone in the massive bed, sunlight streaming through the gauze curtains. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory returned, the beach, the confession, the decision that had changed everything. She found Dante on the terrace, coffee already prepared, his laptop open but ignored. He wore reading glasses she hadn't seen before, and the sight of them made him seem more human, less untouchable. "Morning," he said, smiling. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months." Emily accepted the coffee he offered. "Is this real? Tell me I didn't hallucinate the last 12 hours. "Very real. Your bags are in the closet. Sophia is already planning to feed you properly, and I've cleared my schedule for the next 3 days." "You don't have to do that." "I want to." He closed the laptop. "I want to show you my world, Emily. Not the dangerous parts, not yet, but the beautiful parts. The parts worth protecting." Over the next 3 days, Dante kept his promise. He took her sailing on a yacht that made her previous definition of luxury laughable, showed her hidden ruins that predated recorded history, introduced her to restaurant owners and artists and people who clearly respected and feared him in equal measure. Emily watched him navigate these different worlds with seamless grace, charming one moment, commanding the next, always aware of the subtle power dynamics in every interaction. She saw how people deferred to him, how his presence shifted the energy in a room. She also saw moments of unexpected gentleness, the way he helped an elderly woman carry her groceries up steep stairs, his patience when a child approached asking about his motorcycle, the generous tips he left servers who reminded him of Emily's previous struggle. He was complicated, contradictory, impossible to reduce to simple categories of good or bad. And Emily found herself falling deeper with each revelation. On the third night, they had dinner at the villa. Sophia's cooking, wine from Dante's personal collection, candles flickering as darkness fell over the caldera. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm, the initial awkwardness replaced by comfort that felt earned. "I have to go to Athens tomorrow," Dante said over dessert. "Business. I'll be gone 3 days." Emily's heart sank, though she tried to hide it. "Okay. Come with me." "What?" "Come to Athens. Stay at my apartment there. See another piece of my life." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't want to be away from you." "Dante, I can't just... I have responsibilities." "Do you? You quit the restaurant yesterday." Emily blinked. "I did what?" "I called Costas. Told him you wouldn't be returning, paid him what you would have earned for the rest of the month, plus a generous severance." Dante's expression was unapologetic. "You're not going back to that place. You deserve better." She should be angry at his presumption, at him making decisions without her input. Instead, she felt a rush of relief so powerful it made her dizzy. You can't just rearrange my life. I can if you let me. Say yes, Emily. Come to Athens. Let me show you what our life could look like. Our life. The phrase settled into her chest like a promise. What about your business? Won't I be in the way? You could never be in the way. Most of my meetings are at night anyway. During the day, you'll have the city to explore. Or you could stay in and write. The apartment has a study with a view of the Acropolis. The casual mention of a study, of space dedicated to the creative work she'd abandoned, made her throat tight. You're very good at temptation. I'm very good at recognizing what people need. And you need this, Emily. You need to remember who you were before you started settling. He was right. She knew he was right. And she was tired of denying herself things she wanted out of fear or pride or stubborn independence. Okay, she said, I'll come to Athens. Dante's smile could have lit the night. He stood and pulled her to her feet, into his arms, kissing her with a passion that still surprised her with its intensity. You won't regret this, I promise you that. They made love that night with a new urgency, as if sealing their decision with physical connection. Afterward, lying in the tangled sheets with Dante's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Emily felt the last of her resistance crumble. She was all in now. Whatever came next, danger, complications, heartbreak, she would face it. Because for the first time since leaving Ohio, she felt like she was moving toward something instead of just running away. The next morning, they flew to Athens on a private plane that made Emily's head spin. She'd never experienced wealth like this, the casual luxury that didn't even register as extraordinary to Dante. The flight attendant called him Mr. Cavalli, with careful deference. The pilot asked if the route was acceptable. Is this normal for you? Emily asked as they climbed to cruising altitude. Define normal. Dante squeezed her hand. This is how I travel when commercial schedules don't work. It's practical. It's insane. It's efficient. There's a difference. Athens sprawled below them when they descended, ancient and modern colliding in concrete and marble, the Acropolis rising like a crown above the urban sprawl. Dante's apartment was in Kolonaki, the upscale neighborhood where embassy buildings and designer boutiques competed for space. The apartment itself was stunning, sleek contemporary design that somehow honored the historic building's bones, floor-to-ceiling windows framing views of both the Acropolis and Lake Abetus Hill. The study Dante had mentioned was a sun-drenched room with built-in bookshelves and a desk positioned to capture the view. I thought you might like this space, he said, watching her explore. Emily ran her fingers along the desk's smooth surface. When did you plan this? Plan what? This, the study. You said you barely use this apartment, but this room is set up like someone works here regularly. Dante leaned against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. I had it prepared after our first conversation, before I invited you to the villa. The admission should have alarmed her. Instead, she felt something warm unfurl in her chest. You were that sure I'd say yes? I was that hopeful. He crossed the room and turned her to face him. Emily, I don't do things halfway. When I want something, I commit completely. And I want you. I want this. I want us. She kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into the press of her mouth against his. They made love on the desk, in the afternoon sunlight, surrounded by books and possibility. That evening, Dante left for his first meeting. He dressed in a black suit that transformed him from the relaxed version she'd come to know into something sharper, more dangerous. He checked a phone she'd never seen him use, his expression hardening into the controlled mask she recognized from their first meeting. I'll be back late, he said, kissing her forehead. Don't wait up. Be careful. Something flickered in his eyes. Always. After he left, Emily explored the apartment more thoroughly. Most of it was impersonal. Expensive furniture, quality linens, nothing that revealed the man who lived there. But in the bedroom, she found a photograph on the nightstand she hadn't noticed earlier. A young Dante, maybe 19 or 20, standing with an older man who shared his features. Both were smiling, relaxed in a way she'd never seen Dante look. She was still studying it when her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. You should ask him about his family, about what happened in Rome, before you get in too deep. Emily's blood went cold. She stared at the message, her mind racing. Who had her number? Who was watching them? She thought about replying, about demanding answers. Instead, she deleted the message and tried to push it from her mind. Probably just someone trying to cause trouble, she told herself. Dante had enemies. He'd as much as admitted that. This was just interference. But the unease lingered. Dante returned after midnight, smelling of cigar smoke and expensive scotch. Emily pretended to be asleep, watching through barely open eyes as he undressed in the darkness. He moved stiffly, like something hurt, and when he turned, she saw bruising along his ribs that hadn't been there that morning. He caught her watching. "I thought you were asleep. What happened?" "A disagreement, nothing serious." "You're hurt. I've been hurt worse." He slid into bed beside her, wincing slightly. "Go back to sleep, Emily." But she couldn't. She lay awake listening to his breathing even out, her mind replaying the anonymous text, the photograph, the bruises she'd seen. What exactly had she gotten herself into? The questions multiplied over the next 2 days like cracks spreading through ice. Emily watched Dante leave each evening in his dark suits, watched him return with new bruises or cuts he dismissed as minor disagreements. She noticed the way his phone buzzed constantly with messages he never answered in her presence, the locked office door she wasn't invited to enter, the hushed conversations in Italian or Greek that ended abruptly when she walked into a room. She tried to write, opening her laptop in the sun-drenched study with its perfect view of the Acropolis, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself searching his name online, finding nothing but legitimate business holdings, import companies, real estate ventures, investment portfolios. Everything appeared legal, sanitized, carefully constructed. Too carefully constructed. On the third morning, Dante announced they were returning to Santorini that afternoon. He seemed lighter somehow, the tension that had bracketed his mouth for the past days easing into something closer to contentment. "Everything go well?" Emily asked over breakfast. "Well enough. The Athens business is settled for now." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry I've been distracted. Let me make it up to you." "You don't have to. I want to. Tonight, dinner at the villa. Just us. No phones, no interruptions." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I want to talk about the future. Our future." The intensity in his voice made her pulse quicken. "Okay." They flew back to Santorini in the afternoon, the island appearing below them like a crescent moon floating in an impossibly blue sea. Emily felt something loosen in her chest as they descended. Athens had been beautiful, but unsettling. The villa felt like home in a way that terrified and comforted her equally. Sophia greeted them with obvious relief, speaking rapid Greek to Dante while casting worried glances at Emily. Whatever she was saying made Dante's expression darken briefly before he smoothed it away. "What was that about?" Emily asked when Sophia disappeared into the kitchen. "She worries. It's what she does." He kissed Emily's forehead. "I need to make a few calls. Will you be all right for an hour?" "I'll survive." After he left, Emily wandered the villa restlessly. She found herself in Dante's bedroom, larger than hers, more masculine, dominated by a massive bed and floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd never explored his private space before, had respected the boundary he'd established even as they'd grown closer. Now curiosity overrode restraint. His closet was exactly what she'd expected. Rows of expensive suits, perfectly organized shirts, shoes that probably cost more than her college tuition. Nothing personal, nothing revealing. The bathroom was equally impersonal. Expensive toiletries arranged with hotel-like precision. She was about to leave when she noticed the nightstand drawer slightly ajar. Emily knew she should walk away, knew that trust meant respecting privacy. But the anonymous text haunted her, and the questions had become impossible to ignore. She opened the drawer. Inside were mundane things, a spare watch, reading glasses, a leather journal that looked barely used. But beneath those items, she found a manila folder. Her hands trembled as she lifted it out. The folder was thick, stuffed with papers and photographs. Emily's breath caught when she saw the first image. It was her. Not a recent photo. This one had been taken months ago, maybe even before she'd left Ohio. She was walking out of her old apartment building in Columbus, wearing her winter coat, her expression tired and distant. Someone had circled her face in red marker. Emily's heart hammered as she flipped through more photos. Her serving tables at Helios. Walking through Oya's narrow streets. Sitting alone on a bench overlooking the caldera, her face turned toward the sunset. Each image was dated, time-stamped, annotated with notes and handwriting she didn't recognize. The papers were worse. Background checks, financial records showing her maxed out credit cards and dwindling savings, employment history, even her college transcripts. Someone had compiled a comprehensive dossier on every aspect of her life, and it had been started before she'd ever met Dante. Her vision blurred as the implications crashed over her. Their meeting hadn't been chance. He'd known exactly who she was, exactly where she'd be, exactly how vulnerable she was when he'd walked into that restaurant. Everything. The instant connection, the romantic gestures, the seemingly perfect understanding of what she needed, all of it had been calculated, orchestrated. She'd thought she was finally being seen, finally mattering to someone. Instead, she'd been a target. Emily's hand shook so violently she almost dropped the folder. Nausea rose in her throat as she shoved everything back into the drawer and stumbled toward her own room. Her mind raced through every conversation, every tender moment, every promise Dante had made, reframing them all through this new, horrifying lens. The question that had haunted her since Athens crystallized into painful clarity. She wasn't falling in love. She was falling for a con. She was packing her bags when Dante found her 20 minutes later. "Emily, what are you doing?" She didn't turn around, couldn't look at him without the rage boiling over. "I'm leaving." "Why? What happened?" "You tell me." She spun to face him, her voice shaking. "Actually, no. Let me tell you what happened. I found your little research project, the folder in your nightstand, all those photos you had taken of me before we ever met." Dante went absolutely still, his expression shifting into something unreadable. "Emily, don't. Don't you dare say my name like you care about me." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Was any of it real? The beach? The villa? Athens? Was any of it actually about me, or was I just another business deal you needed to close? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain to me why you had me investigated before approaching me. Explain why you knew everything about my life, my failures, my vulnerabilities, and used them to manipulate me into trusting you. I never manipulated you. You lied by omission. You let me think our meeting was fate, that the connection between us was real, when the whole time you'd orchestrated everything. She grabbed another shirt, shoving it into her bag. Who does that? What kind of person researches someone like they're a business acquisition? The kind who couldn't afford to make a mistake. Dante's voice remained maddeningly calm. The kind who has enemies that would use anyone close to him as a weapon. So this was about protecting yourself? How noble. No. He moved closer and Emily stepped back, maintaining distance between them. The hurt that flashed across his face would have devastated her yesterday. Now it just felt like another manipulation. This was about making sure you were who I thought you were, about verifying that what I felt when I first saw you wasn't just attraction, but something deeper, something worth the risk. When you first saw me? Where? Emily's voice rose. In some surveillance photo, while you were having me followed like a criminal? In Rome, 6 months ago. The answer stopped her cold. What? Dante ran a hand through his hair, the first crack in his composure showing. I was in Rome on business. You were there, sitting alone in a cafe near the Pantheon. You were writing in a notebook, completely absorbed, oblivious to everything around you. I watched you for an hour, the way you'd pause to think, the expressions that crossed your face, the absolute focus. You were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Emily's breath caught despite her anger. That's impossible. I was never in Rome. You were. March 15th. You spent 3 days there before flying to Athens. The dates aligned with her first desperate escape attempt, the long weekend she'd taken before returning to Ohio to formally end her engagement. She'd told no one where she was going, had wanted those days to be hers alone. The fact that Dante knew about them felt like a violation of her most private moments. You followed me from Rome? No, I lost you at the airport. Spent weeks trying to find you again, hiring investigators, searching. When they finally tracked you to Santorini months later, He paused. I had to know if the woman I'd been searching for was real or just a fantasy I'd built in my head. So you had me investigated like a suspect. So I learned everything I could before approaching you, yes. He moved closer again, and this time Emily held her ground. I won't apologize for being careful. My world doesn't allow for blind trust. People die from careless mistakes. And what was I? A careful calculation? At first, yes. I needed to know who you were, what you wanted, whether you were genuinely struggling or running some kind of con yourself. His jaw tightened. But the moment we started talking, the moment I actually met you, everything changed. The research became irrelevant. You became real. How convenient. And I'm supposed to just believe that. I'm asking you to try. Dante reached for her and Emily jerked away. The pain in his eyes looked genuine, but she no longer trusted her ability to read him. Emily, I know how this looks. I know what you must think of me, but I swear to you, everything that happened after I walked into that restaurant was real. My feelings, my devotion, my need to be with you, none of that was calculated. Except for the part where you deliberately arranged our meeting, deliberately chose that restaurant because you knew I worked there. Deliberately sat at that table and asked me to sit with you, knowing exactly what questions to ask because you'd already read my entire life story. Yes, he didn't try to deny it. I engineered the meeting because I couldn't risk scaring you away with the truth. Would you have agreed to dinner with a stranger who admitted he'd been obsessed with you for months? Who'd tracked you across countries? No, I would have run. Exactly. So I gave us a chance to connect naturally, to build something real without the weight of how it started crushing it before it could grow. His voice dropped lower, urgent. And it did grow, Emily. What we have is real. I love you. The words should have filled her with joy. Instead, they felt like shackles. You don't get to say that. Not now. Not after lying to me. I never lied. Omission is still a lie. She grabbed her bag and pushed past him toward the door. I need space. I need to think without you in my head. Where will you go? He didn't try to stop her, but his voice carried an edge of desperation. You have no money, no job, no apartment. The reminder of how completely dependent she'd become on him made Emily's stomach turn. I'll figure it out. That's what I do. I survive. Emily, please, don't leave like this. Dante followed her into the hallway. Stay. Ask me anything you want. I'll tell you everything, show you everything. No more secrets. I don't want your confessions. I want to not feel like an idiot for believing any of this was real. She reached the stairs and turned back to face him. You said you recognized loneliness in me. You said you understood feeling invisible. Was that true? Or was that just from the background check? It was true. I saw it in Rome, saw the same emptiness I feel every day reflected in your eyes. That's what drew me to you in the first place. Not your looks, not your story, but the recognition of someone else who understood what it meant to be surrounded by people and still utterly alone. And you thought stalking me was the appropriate response? I thought being methodical would protect us both. I was wrong. He descended a few steps, closing the distance between them. But I wasn't wrong about us, about what we could be together. Emily's resolve wavered. Part of her wanted to believe him, wanted to accept his explanation and return to the fantasy they'd been building. But the larger part, the part that had learned to protect herself through years of disappointment, knew that trust once shattered couldn't be glued back together with pretty words. I need time, she said quietly. I need to think without you influencing every decision I make. How long? I don't know. A few days? A week? However long it takes to figure out if anything I feel is real or just Stockholm Syndrome in expensive packaging. Dante flinched like she'd struck him. You really think I kidnapped your emotions? I think you're very good at understanding what people need and giving it to them. I think you saw a vulnerable woman and offered her everything she was missing. I think... Her voice cracked. I think I fell in love with you, and I don't know if that's real or just really effective manipulation. The silence that followed was crushing. Dante looked at her like she was something precious he was watching slip through his fingers, and the grief in his expression almost broke her resolve. If you need space, I'll give it to you, he said finally. But I'm not letting you go back to that apartment in Oia or some hostel where you're not safe. There's another property, in Fira. Small villa, fully furnished, overlooking the caldera. It's empty. Take it. Stay as long as you need. I can't accept that. You can and you will. Call it penance for my mistakes if it makes you feel better. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. I'm texting you the address and the security code. Sophia will bring you supplies, but she won't bother you otherwise. Take the motorcycle. It's faster than the scooter you've been using. Dante? Please. The word came out rough, almost broken. Let me do this one thing. Let me know you're safe while you decide whether I'm worth forgiving. Emily wanted to refuse on principle, wanted to prove she didn't need his money or his properties or his protection. But practicality warred with pride, and practicality won. She had maybe 200 euros to her name and nowhere to go. Okay, she whispered. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't disappear. Promise me that when you've made your decision, you'll tell me to my face. I promise. She left before her resolve could crumble, before the tears burning her eyes could fall where he could see them. The motorcycle keys were on the table by the door, exactly where Dante had said they'd be. Emily grabbed them and walked out into the afternoon sunlight, her bag slung over her shoulder, her heart fracturing with each step. The ride to Fira was a blur of winding roads and cliff-edge views she barely registered. The villa Dante had mentioned was tucked into a quieter section of Fira, smaller than his main estate but still luxurious by any reasonable standard. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen and living area, a terrace with an infinity pool that seemed to hang suspended over the caldera. Emily entered the security code and stepped inside. The space was beautiful, impersonal, obviously maintained but rarely used. She dropped her bag in the master bedroom and walked out to the terrace, gripping the railing as she stared at the endless blue stretching before her. She'd run away from Ohio to escape suffocation. Now she was running away from a man who'd offered her everything she'd thought she wanted. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dante. I love you. That's real, even if nothing else is. Take all the time you need. Emily deleted it without responding and turned off her phone. For 3 days, she existed in a fog. She swam in the pool, she stared at the sunset, she opened her laptop and wrote nothing. Sophia came daily with fresh food and supplies, her expression sympathetic but carefully neutral. They didn't discuss Dante, didn't discuss what had happened. The older woman simply made sure Emily was eating and then disappeared. On the 4th day, Emily finally turned her phone back on. It exploded with messages, dozens from Dante, a few from Maria at the restaurant asking if she was okay, and one from the unknown number that had texted her in Athens. Did you ask him yet? Did he tell you about his brother? About why he really came to Santorini? Emily stared at the message, ice crystallizing in her veins. Brother. Dante had never mentioned a brother. The photograph she'd seen in Athens, the older man with similar features. Not a father, a brother. Before she could overthink it, she called the number. A woman answered, her accent Greek, but her English flawless. I wondered when you'd call. Who are you? Someone who knows what Dante Cavalli really is, someone who tried to warn you before you got in too deep. What do you want? To save you from making the same mistake I did. To save you from him. There was bitterness in her voice, old pain barely contained. Meet me, tonight, the old church in Oia, the one on the northern cliff. Come alone. How do I know this isn't a trap? You don't. But do you really want to make decisions about your future without knowing the whole truth? Do you trust Dante to give you that? The line went dead before Emily could respond. She sat on the terrace for an hour, weighing her options. This was obviously a terrible idea. Meeting a mysterious stranger who'd been sending threatening texts, going alone to an isolated location at night, everything about it screamed danger. But the alternative was making a decision about Dante based on incomplete information, and that felt equally dangerous. If there were things he hadn't told her, things that would fundamentally change how she saw him, she needed to know. At 11 that night, Emily rode the motorcycle north toward Oia. The old church the woman had mentioned was a crumbling structure on the far edge of town, too damaged for tourist visits, too historic for demolition. It perched on the cliff like a broken tooth, its blue dome faded and cracked. A figure waited in the shadows of the entrance. As Emily approached, she stepped into the moonlight, a woman in her 30s, beautiful in a hard way, with dark hair and darker eyes. She looked at Emily with an expression that mixed pity and contempt. So you're the one he chose, she said. I can see why. You have that same lost quality she had. Who are you? Emily demanded. My name is Inez. 5 years ago, I was you. The woman Dante Cavalli swept off her feet with grand gestures and carefully researched compliments. The woman who thought she'd found someone who truly understood her. Emily's mouth went dry. You're lying. Am I? Ask me something only someone close to him would know. The scar through his eyebrow. Where did he get it? I don't... From his brother Marco. They were sparring when Dante was 17 and Marco's ring caught him. Marco felt guilty for months. Sus. Inez moved closer. The villa in Santorini has 6 bedrooms. His Athens apartment overlooks the Acropolis and Lycabettus Hill. He sleeps on the left side of the bed and reads Camus when he can't sleep. Should I go on? Emily felt like the ground was dissolving beneath her feet. What happened between you? I fell in love with a fantasy. I thought Dante was this misunderstood man who just needed the right woman to save him from his darkness. Inez laughed bitterly. Turns out he didn't want saving. He wanted control. He wanted someone he could shape into exactly what he needed. That's not what? Not who he is with you. You're special, different from all the others? Inez's voice turned sharp. That's what he told me too, right up until the moment I became inconvenient. What does that mean? It means I started asking questions about his business, about where he went at night, about the violence that followed him like a shadow. And when I wouldn't stop asking, when I threatened to leave, he showed me what he really was. Emily's heart hammered. Did he hurt you? Not physically. Dante's too smart for that, but he destroyed everything I cared about. My job, my reputation, my relationships with my family. He isolated me completely, made me dependent on him, and then discarded me when I was no longer useful. Inez pulled out her phone and showed Emily a photo. This is what love looks like to Dante Cavalli. The image showed a younger Inez, glamorous and smiling, standing beside Dante at some formal event. They looked perfect together, the kind of couple that belonged in magazines. But it was the next photo that made Emily's blood run cold. The same woman, months or years later, hollow-eyed and gaunt, barely recognizable. He did that to you? He reduced me to that. And when I finally escaped, when I finally broke free, he made sure I could never speak about what I knew. Non-disclosure agreements backed by threats so specific I still have nightmares. Inez put her phone away. But you're not bound by those agreements. You can still walk away before he destroys you too. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? I want you to understand what you're dealing with. I want you to know that the man you think you love doesn't exist. Dante Cavalli is a carefully constructed illusion designed to get what he wants. She moved closer, her voice dropping. And what he wants from you isn't love. It's redemption for something unforgivable. What are you talking about? His brother, Marco, the man in the photograph you saw in Athens. Ask Dante what happened to him. Ask why he really came to Santorini, why he chose you specifically. Inez's eyes burned with intensity. And when he tries to explain it away with pretty words and carefully crafted emotion, remember that I stood exactly where you're standing once. I believed him too. And it almost destroyed me. She turned and walked away before Emily could formulate a response, disappearing into the darkness like she'd never been there at all. Emily stood alone in the shadow of the ruined church, her mind reeling. Everything Inez had said contradicted what she knew about Dante, about their relationship. But the photos had been real. The detailed knowledge had been real. And the fear in the other woman's eyes had been too genuine to fake. She rode back to the villa in Fira with her thoughts in chaos. When she arrived, she found Dante waiting on the terrace, his expression grave. Sophia told me you left, he said quietly. I was worried. How long were you and Inez together? Emily demanded. Dante's face went carefully blank. She contacted you. Answer the question. 2 years. It ended badly. He stepped closer and Emily held up a hand, stopping him. Emily, whatever she told you, is it true? Did you isolate her, control her, destroy her life when she tried to leave? No. What happened with Inez was complicated, but it wasn't what she's making it sound like. Then what was it? Dante was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. She wanted things I couldn't give her. Marriage, children, a normal life. When I refused, she tried to force my hand by threatening to expose my business dealings to authorities. I had to protect myself. By ruining her. By making sure she understood that betrayal has consequences. She signed agreements willingly, Emily. She knew what she was doing. And the way she looked in those photos, the woman who was barely recognizable, that wasn't my doing. Inez had problems before we met, addiction, depression. I tried to help her, but I couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like Dante was the victim of a bitter ex trying to cause trouble. But Emily couldn't shake the fear she'd seen in Inez's eyes, couldn't forget the warning. She said you wanted redemption from me. She said I needed to ask you about Marco, about why you really came to Santorini. Emily's voice shook. So I'm asking, what happened to your brother? The color drained from Dante's face. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely shaken, his carefully maintained control cracking to reveal raw pain beneath. Marco died 3 years ago, he said hoarsely. He was killed because of me, because of choices I made, and I've been trying to atone for it ever since. The admission hung between them like a blade. Emily felt her anger waver, replaced by something more complicated, grief and fear and desperate need to understand. Tell me everything, she said. No more secrets, no more carefully edited versions. Tell me the truth, Dante, or I walk away right now and you never see me again. He looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never seen before, absolute terror at the prospect of losing her. Okay, he whispered. Okay. They sat on the terrace as darkness deepened over the caldera, the lights of Fira twinkling like fallen stars along the cliff face. Dante poured them both wine with hands that trembled slightly, and Emily noticed the vulnerability in the gesture, the way his usual control had fractured to reveal something raw beneath. Marco was 2 years older than me, Dante began, his voice low. Growing up in Rome, we had nothing. Our father left before I was born, and our mother worked 3 jobs just to keep us fed. Marco raised me more than she did. He taught me how to fight, how to read people, how to survive in a neighborhood where weakness got you killed. He paused, staring into his wineglass like it held answers. Emily remained silent, afraid that speaking would break whatever spell had loosened his tongue. When I was 19, I started working for a man named Luca Barone. He ran logistics for some of Rome's more prominent families, moving goods that couldn't go through normal channels. Marco warned me against it, said getting involved with those people would destroy me. But I was young and arrogant and desperate to prove I could be more than just another street kid. What kind of goods? Emily asked quietly. Everything. Weapons, stolen art, pharmaceuticals that hadn't been approved yet. Whatever needed moving from point A to point B without official scrutiny. Dante's jaw tightened. I was good at it, smart, efficient, willing to take risks other people wouldn't. Within 2 years, I was running my own operations. Within 5, I'd built an empire that made Barone's organization look like amateur hour. Emily could hear the pride in his voice, quickly chased by shame. She wanted to interrupt, to demand he get to the part about Marco, but she forced herself to wait. Marco hated what I'd become. We fought constantly about it. He'd gone legitimate, became an accountant, married a woman named Sophia, had a daughter. Dante's voice cracked slightly. He kept trying to pull me out, kept saying the life I was building would only end one way. I told him he was jealous, that he couldn't handle watching his little brother surpass him. But he was right. He was right. Dante set down his glass and stood, walking to the terrace railing. 3 years ago, I made a deal with a buyer in Athens. High-value merchandise, simple exchange, substantial profit. But someone talked. The authorities got wind of it, and they set up a sting operation. Emily's stomach clenched with dread, already anticipating where this was going. I wasn't supposed to be at the exchange. I had people for that. But something felt off about the whole arrangement, so I went personally to verify everything was legitimate. Marco found out somehow. He showed up at the warehouse trying to stop me, trying one last time to convince me to walk away before it was too late. Dante's shoulders tensed beneath his shirt, and Emily could see him steeling himself for what came next. The authorities moved in while we were arguing. Guns, shouting, chaos, Marco. His voice broke completely. He took several breaths before continuing. Marco stepped in front of me when the shooting started, took 3 bullets meant for me, died in my arms while I was screaming for help that came too late. The raw agony in his words made Emily's eyes burn with tears. Whatever she'd expected, whatever Inez had implied, this wasn't it. This was grief so profound it had reshaped him entirely. The authorities ruled it a justified response to a dangerous situation. My lawyers got me out with minimal charges. They couldn't prove I knew about the illegal merchandise, couldn't definitively tie me to the operation. I walked away free while Marco was buried. Dante turned to face her, and the devastation in his expression stole her breath. His daughter was 4 years old. She asked Sophia why her papa wasn't coming home, and there was no answer that made it make sense. Dante, I destroyed everything that night. My relationship with Sophia and my niece, my mother's respect, any pretense that I was anything other than what Marco had warned me I'd become. A man who valued profit over people, who'd let his own brother die protecting him from consequences he'd earned. Emily stood and moved toward him, her earlier anger melting in the face of his pain. It wasn't your fault. You didn't pull the trigger. I put him in that warehouse. My choices, my arrogance, my refusal to listen to the one person who actually gave a damn about my soul. He met her eyes. I made a promise at his funeral. I swore I'd find a way to honor his memory, to become the man he'd believed I could be. And I've spent 3 years trying to figure out what that looks like. Is that why you came to Santorini? Partly. I needed distance from Rome, from the business connections and the constant reminders. But mostly, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Marco used to say I needed to learn that people weren't assets to be acquired or problems to be solved. That I needed to connect with someone real, someone who challenged me to be better rather than just reflecting back what I wanted to see. Understanding dawned slowly, painfully. That's what you saw in Rome, in that cafe. I saw a woman who reminded me of who I used to be before the money and power corrupted everything. Someone intelligent and searching and brave enough to risk everything for the possibility of something better. Dante crossed to her, stopping just out of reach. I knew it was wrong to approach you the way I did, knew the research and planning crossed every ethical line. But I was desperate, Emily. Desperate to prove I was capable of something real, something that wasn't built on manipulation or transaction. So you manipulated your way into my life to prove you weren't manipulative? I know how it sounds. I know it makes me a hypocrite. His hands clenched at his sides. But everything I told you was true. The connection we built, the feelings that developed, those weren't calculated. They terrified me precisely because they were real. Emily's mind raced, trying to reconcile everything she'd learned with what she felt. The folder in his drawer, Inez's warnings, the careful orchestration of their meeting, all of it still stung. But the grief in Dante's voice when he spoke of Marco, the raw vulnerability in admitting his failures, that felt genuine in a way that cut through her defenses. What about Inez? She asked. What really happened there? Dante sighed heavily. Inez was my attempt at normal before I met you. I thought if I could make a relationship work, if I could commit to someone and build something stable, it would prove I'd changed. But I chose wrong. I chose someone who wanted the lifestyle more than the person. And when she realized I'd never give her the Instagram perfect life she was chasing, she tried to blackmail me into compliance. That's not what she said. I'm sure it's not. Inez has convinced herself she's a victim rather than accepting her role in how things ended. Yes, I had her sign non-disclosure agreements. Yes, I used my resources to ensure she couldn't damage my business. But I didn't destroy her life, Emily. She did that herself with choices that had nothing to do with me. And the photos she showed me, the ones where she looked like she was falling apart, that was after she left me, after her various addictions caught up with her. I tried to get her into treatment. She refused. I tried to help her family intervene. She cut them off. His voice softened. I'm not blameless in how we ended, but I'm not the monster she's painting either. Emily moved to the railing, staring out at the dark water. Everything felt too complicated, too layered with competing truths. She wanted simple answers, good or bad, trustworthy or dangerous. Instead, she got this messy middle ground where intentions and actions tangled into something impossible to parse cleanly. Why me? She asked finally. You said Marco wanted you to connect with someone real, but you could have approached anyone. Why specifically choose a broke American waitress? Because you weren't trying to be anything other than what you were. Because when I watched you in that cafe, you were fully present in your own life, engaged with your thoughts and your writing in a way that spoke to genuine passion rather than performance. He moved beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. And because when I looked at you, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Marco died. Hope. The word settled between them, fragile and precious. Emily turned to face him, searching his expression for deception and finding only exhausted honesty. I don't know if I can trust you, she said quietly. I don't know if anything you've told me changes the fundamental problem, which is that you orchestrated our meeting based on research and planning rather than genuine connection. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm asking for a chance to prove that what we built was real, despite how it started. Dante reached for her hand tentatively, and when she didn't pull away, his fingers closed around hers. I love you, Emily. Not the version of you I researched, not some idealized fantasy. The real you, with all your contradictions and complications and magnificent refusal to be anything other than exactly who you are. Emily's breath caught. She wanted desperately to believe him, wanted to surrender to the emotions that still pulled her toward him despite everything. But Inez's warnings echoed in her mind, the fear in that woman's eyes, a reminder that love could be weaponized. I need more time, she said. I need to think without you here influencing my decision. Pain flashed across Dante's face, but he nodded. How long? I don't know, a week maybe? However long it takes to figure out if I'm strong enough to love someone as complicated as you without losing myself in the process. And if you decide you're not, then I leave Santorini and you let me go. No following, no researching, no trying to orchestrate another meeting. You accept that some things can't be controlled or fixed, and you move on. The terms clearly devastated him, but Dante didn't argue. If that's what you need, I'll give it to you. But Emily, he cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I meant what I said about loving you. That's not going to change regardless of what you decide. He kissed her forehead and left before she could respond, his footsteps fading into the night. Emily stood alone on the terrace, her hand still tingling from his touch, her heart fracturing under the weight of too many conflicting feelings. The next week passed in a strange, suspended state. Emily wrote for the first time in months, pouring all her confusion and pain into pages that would never see publication but needed to exist anyway. She swam in the pool until exhaustion forced clarity. She walked the streets of Fira at odd hours, observing other people's lives and trying to remember what normal looked like. Sophia continued her daily visits, but now she stayed longer, sharing coffee and conversation. Emily learned that the older woman had worked for Dante for 5 years, had watched him transform from a ruthless businessman into someone actively trying to be better. He is not perfect, Sophia said one morning, her English heavily accented but clear. But he tries. After Marco died, something changed. The hardness. It cracked. He started thinking about legacy, about what kind of man he wanted to be. Do you think he's capable of real love? Emily asked. Or is everything just another transaction? Sophia considered the question seriously. I think he is learning, like child learning to walk. Many falls, many mistakes, but trying. She patted Emily's hand. You are good for him. He smiles now. Real smiles, not the fake ones for business. The endorsement from someone who had no reason to lie meant more than Emily wanted to admit. But it didn't erase the fundamental question that kept her awake at night. Could she build a life with someone whose foundation was constructed on deception, even if the structure built upon it was genuine? On the 6th day, Emily received a package. Inside was a leather journal, expensive and beautiful, with a note in Dante's precise handwriting. Marco gave me this the year before he died. He said I should write down the things that mattered, the moments that made me human rather than just functional. I never used it, couldn't bear to after he was gone, but it belongs with someone who understands the power of words. Whether you stay or leave, I want you to have it. Write your stories, Emily. Don't let anyone convince you they're not worth telling. She ran her fingers over the smooth leather, feeling the weight of the gift. It would have been easier if Dante had stayed silent, had given her space to forget him. Instead, he kept offering pieces of himself that made dismissing him impossible. That night, she opened the journal and began writing. Not the fiction she'd always imagined creating, but the truth of the past weeks. Every moment from seeing Dante for the first time to standing on this terrace, trying to decide her future. The words flowed faster than she could capture them, months of suppressed creativity finally finding release. When she finished hours later, her hand cramping and dawn breaking over the caldera, she read through what she'd written and saw her answer clearly for the first time. She called Dante at 7 in the morning. He answered on the first ring, his voice rough with sleep or emotion. Emily, can you come here? I've made my decision. The line went silent for a beat. I'll be there in 20 minutes, but... He arrived in 15, still wearing the same clothes from the night before like he hadn't slept. His hair was disheveled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked vulnerable in a way she'd never seen, all his careful control stripped away by fear of what she might say. They stood on the terrace in the early morning light, the air cool and salt-sharp. Emily held the journal he'd given her, using it like a shield against the intensity of his gaze. I read about your business, she said without preamble. Spent the last week researching everything I could find. The legitimate holdings, the rumors, the court cases that never quite stuck. You were right about operating in gray areas. Some of what you do seems barely legal. Some of it definitely isn't. Dante's expression didn't change. I told you I wouldn't lie. I know. That's what makes this so complicated. She set down the journal. I also thought about what you said about Marco, about trying to become someone who valued people over profit, and I realized something. You could have lied to me about how we met, could have hidden the folder, destroyed the evidence, let me keep believing in the fairy tale. I considered it. But you didn't. You gave me the truth even knowing it might destroy everything. That means something. Hope flickered in his eyes, quickly suppressed. What are you saying? I'm saying I believe you about the feelings being real. I believe you're trying to be better than you were. But she paused, making sure he understood the weight of what came next. I also believe that loving you is going to be the hardest thing I've ever done. That there will be more secrets, more moral compromises, more moments where I have to decide if standing beside you is worth the cost. You're not wrong. So here's what I need. Complete honesty going forward. No more research, no more orchestrated meetings, no more protecting me from truths you think I can't handle. If we do this, we do it as equals who respect each other enough to share the complicated parts. Done. Anything else? Emily took a deep breath. I need my own life, my own purpose that isn't just existing in your world. I need to write, to create something that's mine, to maintain some part of myself that isn't defined by being your partner. I'll build you a studio, hire you an assistant, whatever you need to make that happen. I don't need you to build me anything. I need you to support me building it myself. She moved closer. And I need you to understand that I'm choosing you, Dante. Not your money, not your protection, not the lifestyle. You. The complicated, damaged, trying to be better man who saw something in me worth pursuing across countries and months. Dante's control finally shattered. He pulled her into his arms with desperate intensity, his face buried in her hair, his shoulders shaking with relief or emotion or both. I thought I'd lost you, thought I'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me before it had a chance to grow. You almost did. I almost let you. Emily pulled back enough to see his face. But I realized something this week. Running away from Ohio didn't fix me. Running away from you wouldn't fix me either. At some point, I have to stop running and start building something worth staying for. And you think I'm worth staying for? I think we might be worth staying for. Together. She touched his face, tracing the scar through his eyebrow. But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if loving you starts to destroy who I am, if I start losing myself in your world, you'll let me go. That you'll love me enough to release me even if it breaks you. The request clearly devastated him, but Dante didn't hesitate. I promise. Your freedom matters more than my happiness. It always will. Emily kissed him then, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into the connection. Relief and fear and desperate hope all tangled together, creating something fragile but real. They stood wrapped in each other as the sun climbed higher, painting the caldera in shades of gold and rose. When they finally broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me. Not to the villa, to the estate. I want you fully in my life, no more separate bedrooms or polite distance. I want to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. The estate? Where's that? North of Oia, on the most isolated part of the island. I bought it last year when I decided to make Santorini my base. It's... He paused, searching for words. It's a fortress, basically. High walls, security systems, guards. Not particularly romantic, but safe. The description should have alarmed her. Instead, Emily felt curious. Why do you need a fortress? Because the life I've built has enemies. People who'd use anyone close to me as leverage or revenge. If you're with me, really with me, you need to understand what that means. His expression grew serious. There will be armed guards, restricted movement sometimes, precautions that will feel invasive and excessive. I need to know you can live with that. Emily thought about it, about trading freedom for safety, about what it meant to love someone whose world required walls and weapons. A month ago, the idea would have sent her running. Now, after everything they'd been through, it felt like a reasonable price for what they were building. "Show me," she said. They rode together on the motorcycle, north along the coastal road past Oya, toward the wild section of the island where tourists rarely ventured. The landscape grew more rugged, the volcanic rock exposed in dramatic formations. Finally, Dante turned onto a private road marked with discreet security cameras. The estate appeared gradually as they climbed, high stone walls that seemed to grow organically from the cliff, modern architecture hidden behind traditional facades. Guards in casual clothes that didn't quite hide their weapons nodded at Dante as they passed through heavy gates that closed behind them with decisive finality. Inside the walls, the property transformed into a different world. Manicured gardens cascaded down terraced levels, infinity pools reflected the sky, and the main house sprawled across multiple levels connected by glass walkways and stone stairs. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. "You live here alone?" Emily asked as Dante parked. "Mostly. Guards rotate through, Sophia comes daily, but yes, alone." He helped her off the motorcycle. "I built it thinking I needed isolation to stay safe. Turns out, isolation just made the emptiness echo louder." He led her through the house, showing her the various rooms. A library that rivaled small universities, a gym with equipment that looked military grade, a wine cellar that descended into the volcanic rock itself. Everything spoke of wealth and taste and profound loneliness. The master suite occupied the entire top floor, with walls of glass that opened onto a private terrace. The view stretched endlessly. The caldera to the south, the open Aegean to the north, nothing but water and sky and possibility. "This is where I've been sleeping," Dante said, gesturing to the massive bed. "Or not sleeping, mostly. Lying awake thinking about you, about whether you'd ever forgive me." Emily explored the space, noting the books on the nightstand, Camus, as Inez had said, along with poetry she hadn't expected. The photograph from Athens was here too, Marco's smile frozen in happier times. She picked it up carefully. "Tell me about him. Not the tragedy, but who he was." Dante's expression softened. He took the photo and stared at it for a long moment. "He was everything I wasn't, patient, kind, willing to see the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. He coached youth football on weekends, helped immigrants navigate bureaucracy, always had time for anyone who needed it." His voice grew thick. He believed people were fundamentally good, that everyone deserved second chances. I used to think that made him weak. Now I think it made him the strongest person I ever knew. He'd be proud of you for trying to change. I hope so. Some days I'm not sure anything I do will ever be enough to make up for getting him killed. Emily set down the photo and took Dante's hands. "You didn't kill him. The situation did. The choices that led there did. But not you directly. The distinction doesn't bring him back. No. But it might allow you to forgive yourself eventually, to honor his memory by becoming the man he believed you could be, rather than punishing yourself forever for failing to be perfect." Dante pulled her close, his embrace tight enough to border on desperate. "How do you do that? See through all my bullshit to the truth underneath?" "Practice. I've been lying to myself for years about what I wanted. Recognizing it in others comes naturally now." She pulled back to look at him. "So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move in here, into this ridiculous fortress you've built. I'm going to set up a writing space somewhere with a good view, and we're going to figure out how to build something real together." "Just like that?" "Just like that, with one condition." "Name it." "I want to meet your mother and Sophia and your niece. I want to know the people who knew Marco, who can tell me stories about him and you and the life you had before everything went wrong." The request clearly surprised him. "My mother hasn't spoken to me since the funeral. Sophia made it clear she blames me for Marco's death. I'm not sure they'd even see me." "Then we'll find a way to make them willing to try. Because if we're doing this, if we're really building a future together, I need to understand all of you, not just the parts you've chosen to show me." Dante looked at her like she was something precious and impossible, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" "I'm practical. There's a difference." Emily smiled, "But I appreciate the sentiment." They spent the rest of the day settling her into the estate. It felt surreal, moving from the small villa in Fira to this sprawling compound, but also strangely right. like pieces finally clicking into place after months of existing in limbo. That night, they lay together in the massive bed, wrapped in sheets that cost more than Emily's entire wardrobe. Dante traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, his touch possessive and tender at once. "I have something for you," he said quietly. "I was going to give it to you at dinner that night in Athens before everything fell apart." He reached into the nightstand and pulled out a small box. Emily's heart stuttered when she saw it. Black velvet, clearly expensive, the kind of box that held significant jewelry. "Dante, if that's a ring—" "It's not. Open it." She did, and found a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant. The pendant was a key, intricately detailed, beautiful in its simplicity. "A key?" she asked. "To everything. The houses, the cars, the accounts. But more importantly," he took the necklace and fastened it around her neck. "A reminder that you hold the key to parts of me I've kept locked away for years. That trusting you with those parts is the bravest thing I've ever done." Emily touched the pendant, feeling its weight against her skin. "That's incredibly cheesy." "I know, Marco would have loved it. He was sentimental like that." "Then I love it too." She kissed him softly. "Thank you. For this, for the honesty, for being willing to let me see the broken parts. Thank you for not running when you saw them." They made love slowly that night, learning each other all over again with new understanding. Every touch felt weighted with significance, every kiss a promise of the future they were choosing to build together. Afterward, as Emily drifted toward sleep in Dante's arms, she felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, but acceptance. Acceptance that loving him would be complicated and challenging and occasionally terrifying. Acceptance that she was strong enough to handle it. Acceptance that sometimes the best things in life came wrapped in complications that made them worth fighting for. "Emily?" Dante's voice was barely a whisper in the darkness. "Hmm?" "I love you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worth the risk you're taking." She smiled against his shoulder. "I'm holding you to that. I'm counting on it." Emily fell asleep with the key resting against her heart, feeling safer and more seen than she'd ever felt in her carefully constructed normal life. Whatever came next, the challenges, the dangers, the inevitable complications of loving someone as complex as Dante Cavalli, she would face it with eyes open and heart willing. She'd stopped running. Now she was building. And that made all the difference. The first month at the estate passed in a strange blend of domesticity and danger that Emily slowly learned to navigate. She claimed a sun-filled room on the second floor for her writing, positioning the desk to capture both the morning light and the view of the caldera. Words flowed easier now, stories about broken people finding unexpected redemption, about love that survived despite impossible odds. She didn't analyze the parallels too closely. Dante kept his promise about honesty, which meant Emily learned things she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She learned that the bruises he sometimes came home with were from negotiations that turned physical, that his phone calls in Italian often involved threats delivered in his calm, controlled voice, that the guards patrolling the estate weren't just for show. His world was darker than she'd imagined, more violent, more morally compromised, but she also saw the changes he was making, contracts he refused because they crossed lines he'd drawn for himself, money quietly funneled to Marco's daughter's education fund, business partners he cut ties with when their methods became too brutal. He was trying, genuinely trying, to become someone his brother would have respected. "I need to go to Rome next week," Dante said one morning over breakfast. They'd fallen into a routine. Coffee on the terrace at sunrise, Sophia's cooking, comfortable silence punctuated by easy conversation. "I'd like you to come with me." Emily looked up from her laptop. "For how long?" 3 days. I have meetings I can't avoid, but..." He paused, his expression carefully neutral. "I want to try reaching out to my mother, to Sophia. I thought having you there might make it less confrontational." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest tighten. She knew how much his family's rejection still wounded him, how he carried the guilt of Marco's death like a physical weight. "Are you sure they'll see you?" "No, but I have to try. For Marco, and for you, because you asked me to." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Will you come?" "Of course." They flew to Rome on a gray October morning, the city spreading beneath them in layers of history and modernity. Dante's apartment there was in Trastevere, tucked into a building that dated back centuries but had been renovated with contemporary luxury. Unlike his other properties, this one felt lived in, personal. Photos on the walls showed a younger Dante with Marco, their mother, extended family at celebrations Emily could only imagine. This was Marco's place, Dante said quietly, watching her examine the photos. He left it to me in his will. I couldn't bring myself to change anything, so it's exactly as he left it. Emily understood then why everything felt so warm here, why books were stacked haphazardly on shelves and mismatched furniture created cozy corners. This was Marco's warmth preserved in amber, a shrine to the man Dante had lost. Does Sophia know you kept it this way? I don't know. We haven't spoken since the funeral. He moved to the window, staring out at the Roman skyline. I sent her a message yesterday. Asked if she'd meet me for coffee. She hasn't responded. Give her time. You said she has every right to be angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. I killed her husband, Emily. Nothing I do will ever change that. You didn't pull the trigger. I put him in that situation. The distinction doesn't matter to a widow trying to explain to her daughter why daddy isn't coming home. His shoulders tensed. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should just let them heal without reopening the wound. Emily crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. Or maybe they need to see that you're genuinely trying to change, that Marco's death wasn't meaningless if it transformed you into someone better. Dante turned in her embrace, his expression tortured. What if it wasn't enough? What if nothing I do will ever be enough? Then at least you tried. At least you honored him by becoming the man he believed you could be, even if his family never acknowledges it. She touched his face. But you won't know unless you try. His phone buzzed before he could respond. Dante checked it, and his breath caught. Sophia, she'll meet me tomorrow afternoon, at the park where Marco used to take their daughter. The location choice was clearly deliberate, designed to remind Dante of everything he'd destroyed. Emily felt protective anger flare on his behalf, but she kept it hidden. Sophia had earned her bitterness. Do you want me to come with you? She asked. Yes, but I don't know if that's fair to you putting you in the middle of this. I'm already in the middle. I chose to be. Emily kissed him softly. We face it together. The next day dawned cold and crisp, the kind of autumn weather that made Rome's ancient stones look even more timeless. They arrived at the park early, Dante's tension radiating off him in waves. Emily had never seen him this nervous, this uncertain. His usual confidence had evaporated, leaving someone younger and more vulnerable in its place. Sophia appeared at exactly 2:00, punctual in a way that felt aggressive. She was beautiful despite the grief that had carved lines around her eyes, dark-haired and elegant in simple black. A little girl walked beside her, maybe 7 now, with Marco's smile and Sophia's delicate features. Dante froze when he saw them. Emily felt him trying to retreat and tightened her grip on his hand, anchoring him in place. Sophia's eyes found Dante and something fierce and painful crossed her face. She bent down and spoke quietly to her daughter, who nodded and ran toward the playground. Only then did Sophia approach. You have 5 minutes, she said without preamble. Her English was accented but clear. Say what you need to say. Sophia, Dante's voice cracked. Emily had never heard him sound so broken. I'm sorry. I know those words are inadequate. I know they don't bring him back or ease your pain, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. For not listening to Marco. For putting him in that situation. For being too arrogant and stupid to see what mattered until it was too late. Sophia's expression remained hard, unforgiving. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't imagined you suffering every day for the past 3 years? I have suffered, but nothing compared to what you and Julia have endured. Don't say her name, Sophia's voice turned sharp as broken glass. You don't get to speak about my daughter. You lost that right when you got her father killed. Emily felt Dante flinch, but he didn't retreat. You're right. I have no rights here, no claims to your forgiveness or understanding. But I wanted you to know that I've spent 3 years trying to become the man Marco believed I could be. I've left the criminal operations, liquidated the dangerous assets, tried to build something legitimate that would make him proud. How noble. And that brings him back how exactly? It doesn't. Nothing can. Dante's hands clenched at his sides. But Marco died trying to save me, trying one last time to pull me back from the edge. I owe it to his memory to make that sacrifice mean something. Sophia stared at him for a long moment, and Emily saw grief and rage and something that might have been exhausted. Resignation warring in her expression. He loved you so much. Even after everything, even knowing what you'd become, he never stopped believing you could change. It killed me watching him tear himself apart trying to save you. I know, and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Good. You should. Sophia's gaze shifted to Emily, assessing her with sharp intelligence. And who are you? Another woman he's using to make himself feel human? The accusation stung, but Emily met her eyes steadily. I'm someone who loves him despite knowing exactly what he's done and who he's been. Someone who believes people can change if they're willing to do the work. How idealistic. Has he told you about the people he's hurt? The lives he's destroyed building his empire? Some of it. Probably not all. But yes, I know he's done terrible things. Emily stepped closer. I also know he's trying to be better. That he wakes up some nights consumed with guilt over Marco. That he's restructured his entire life to honor his brother's memory. That doesn't erase the past, but it has to count for something. Sophia's expression softened slightly, though the hardness didn't leave her eyes. Marco would have liked you. He always said Dante needed someone strong enough to challenge him, to refuse to accept his bullshit. She turned back to Dante. My daughter asks about you sometimes. Asks why Uncle Dante doesn't visit anymore, why you missed her birthday. Dante's face crumpled. I assumed you wouldn't want me around her. I don't. But she remembers you teaching her to ride a bike, remembers you making her laugh. Children don't understand adult complications. They just know people they love disappeared without explanation. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself. I'm not ready to forgive you. I may never be ready. But Julia deserves better than losing both her father and her uncle because of adult mistakes. Hope flickered in Dante's eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying you can send her birthday cards. You can contribute to her education fund like you've been doing anonymously. Yes, I know about that. You can exist on the periphery of her life in whatever way doesn't destroy my peace. She paused. And maybe in time, when the grief isn't so sharp, we can try to build something that honors Marco's memory better than mutual avoidance. Sophia, thank you. You don't know what this means. I do know. That's why I'm offering it. Because Marco would want his daughter to know that even good people make terrible mistakes, that redemption is possible if you're willing to work for it. She glanced toward the playground where Julia was swinging, her laughter carrying on the wind. He believed in second chances. I'm trying to honor that, even though every part of me wants to hate you forever. Dante wiped roughly at his eyes, not bothering to hide the tears. I'll never stop trying to earn this. I swear it. See that you don't. Sophia started to turn away, then paused. Your mother is at the house in Prati. She won't admit it, but she misses you. 3 years is a long time to punish herself for your mistakes. She blames herself? Of course she does. She's a mother. We always find a way to make our children's failures our responsibility. Sophia's expression gentled slightly. Go see her, Dante. Let her see that you're still alive, still trying. It might not fix everything, but it's a start. She walked away before he could respond, collecting Julia from the playground and disappearing down the path. Dante stood frozen, staring after them, his face wet with tears he wasn't bothering to contain. Emily pulled him into her arms and he collapsed against her, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. They stood like that for a long time, the Roman afternoon cool around them, while Dante released years of grief and guilt and desperate hope. She didn't forgive me, he said finally, his voice muffled against Emily's shoulder. No, but she gave you a chance to earn it. That's more than you had this morning. It's more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's what you're getting, so let's not waste it. Emily pulled back to look at him. Are you ready to see your mother? I don't know. What if she... Then we'll deal with it together, like everything else. They took a taxi to Prati, an elegant neighborhood near the Vatican. Dante's childhood home was a modest apartment in a building that had seen better days, but maintained its dignity through careful upkeep. He stood outside the door for a full minute before finally knocking. The woman who answered was in her 70s, small and fierce-looking, with Dante's dark eyes and Marco's gentle mouth. Her expression cycled through shock, anger, and something that looked like desperate relief before settling on careful neutrality. Dante, she said in Italian. Mama, he replied in the same language. Then, switching to English for Emily's benefit, this is Emily. We're together. His mother's gaze shifted to Emily, assessing her with the same sharp intelligence Sophia had shown. You chose this one? After everything? I chose myself, Emily said before Dante could respond. But yes, we chose each other. Something that might have been approval flickered in the older woman's eyes. Well, don't stand in the hallway. Come in. I'll make coffee. The apartment was exactly what Emily expected. Cramped but immaculate, every surface covered with photos of Marco and Dante at various ages. A shrine to the sons who'd both been lost in different ways. Dante's mother, Lucia, she introduced herself, moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing espresso with the ritualistic precision of someone for whom the routine mattered more than the beverage. When she finally sat down across from them, her expression had softened into something closer to exhausted resignation. You look terrible, she said to Dante in Italian. I haven't been sleeping well. Good. You shouldn't sleep well after what you did. Dante flinched, but didn't argue. I know. I'm sorry, Mama, for all of it. Lucia switched to English, her accent thick, but her words clear. Sorry doesn't bring Marco back. Sorry doesn't give Julia her father. Sorry is just words from someone who destroyed my family. I know that too. Do you? Do you really understand what you took from us? Her voice rose slightly. I raised you both to be good men, to value family above everything, and you chose money and power and criminal activities over your own brother's life. He chose to step in front of me. I never asked. Of course you never asked. Marco would have died for you without question because that's what brothers do. But you put him in a position where that sacrifice was necessary. You are responsible, Dante. Not the authorities, not the circumstances. You. The words landed like physical blows. Emily watched Dante absorb them without defending himself, without trying to deflect or minimize. He simply sat and took his mother's rage as deserved punishment. You're right, he said quietly. I am responsible, and I've spent 3 years trying to figure out how to live with that. And have you figured it out? No, but I'm trying. I've left the criminal operations, cleaned up the business, tried to build something Marco wouldn't have been ashamed of. It doesn't erase what I did, but it's all I know how to do. Lucia studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Emily. And you think he can change? You believe this? Emily chose her words carefully. I think he's already changing. That he'll spend the rest of his life trying to become worthy of Marco's sacrifice. Whether that's enough is for you to decide. Wise answer, also honest. Lucia sipped her espresso. Marco loved you like the other half of his soul. He used to say you were the smart one, the ambitious one, the one who would do great things. He believed in you even when I had given up. Dante's voice was barely audible. I failed him. Yes, you did. Lucia set down her cup, but he also knew the risks of trying to save you. He walked into that warehouse with open eyes, knowing you might not listen, knowing things could go wrong. He chose to try anyway because that's who he was. That doesn't make his death my fault any less. No, it doesn't. But it means his sacrifice was his choice, made out of love rather than obligation. You dishonor that choice by wallowing in guilt instead of becoming the man he died believing you could be. The shift in perspective clearly shook Dante. He stared at his mother like she'd spoken in a foreign language. How can you, after everything, how can you say that? Because I loved both my sons. I'm furious at you for the choices you made, devastated by what you cost our family. But you're still my son, Dante, still the boy I raised, the man Marco never stopped loving. Lucia's voice cracked. And I'm tired of losing pieces of my family to grief and rage. Marco is gone. I can't change that. But you're still here, still breathing, still capable of doing better. I won't waste that by holding on to hatred. Dante broke then, the careful control he'd maintained throughout all the confrontations finally shattering completely. He put his head in his hands and wept like a child, his shoulders shaking with the force of emotions too long suppressed. Lucia moved around the table and pulled him into her arms, murmuring in Italian, her own tears falling into his hair. Emily felt her own eyes burning as she watched 3 years of pain and separation begin to heal in this small kitchen in Rome. When Dante finally composed himself, his mother held his face between her hands and spoke fiercely in Italian. Emily caught enough words to understand the gist, promises extracted, expectations set, conditional forgiveness offered with the clear understanding that it could be revoked if he failed to honor Marco's memory. They stayed for dinner, Lucia cooking with the focused intensity of someone expressing love through food. She told stories about Dante and Marco as boys, about their fights and reconciliations, about the deep bond that had always existed between them despite their different paths. The apartment filled with laughter and tears in equal measure, years of silence breaking apart to make room for complicated healing. As they were leaving, Lucia pulled Emily aside. Take care of him, but also take care of yourself. Don't lose who you are trying to fix who he was. I won't. That's the promise we made each other. Good. Then you might actually make this work. She pressed something into Emily's hand, a small medal of St. Christopher, worn smooth with age. This was Marco's. He carried it everywhere, said it kept him safe. Clearly it didn't work, but her voice caught. I want Dante to have it. Will you give it to him when the time is right? Emily closed her fingers around the medal, feeling the weight of the trust being offered. I will. Thank you, Lucia. Don't thank me yet. You're taking on a difficult man with a dark past and uncertain future. Thank me if you're both still happy in 5 years. The flight back to Santorini that night felt lighter somehow, despite the emotional exhaustion. Dante stared out the window at the darkness, his hand clasped around Emily's, the tension that had lived in his shoulders for years, visibly eased. I never thought... He paused, searching for words. I never imagined they'd give me a chance to try again. People are more forgiving than we give them credit for, especially when they see genuine effort to change. Sophia said maybe in time we could build something. My mother said I dishonored Marco by wallowing instead of becoming better. He turned to face Emily. They gave me permission to move forward instead of staying trapped in guilt. What will you do with it? Earn it. Every single day, I'll work to earn it. His expression grew serious. I want to establish a foundation in Marco's name, something that helps at-risk youth, gives them alternatives to the criminal life I chose, something that turns his death into something meaningful. Emily squeezed his hand. He'd love that. I want you to run it. You're better with people than I am, better at seeing what they need. And you need your own purpose, your own identity, separate from being my partner. The offer surprised her. Dante, I don't have experience running a foundation. You have empathy and intelligence and the ability to see people as individuals rather than assets. That's more valuable than experience. He brought her hand to his lips. Say yes. Help me turn something terrible into something that matters. Emily thought about it, about the opportunity to create real change, to build something meaningful from tragedy. It felt right in a way her previous life in marketing never had. Okay, yes, let's do it. Thank you. He rested his head against hers. For all of it. For coming to Rome, for standing beside me while I faced the people I'd hurt, for seeing past who I was to who I'm trying to become. That's what love is, isn't it? Seeing someone completely and choosing them anyway. They landed in Santorini near midnight, the island quiet and dark beneath them. The estate felt like home when they arrived, Sophia having left lights on and food waiting despite the late hour. Emily realized with some surprise that she'd stopped thinking of this as Dante's house and started thinking of it as theirs, a subtle shift that spoke to how deeply she'd woven herself into his life. The next 3 months passed in a blur of activity. Dante systematically dismantled the last of his questionable business operations, taking losses that made his lawyers nervous, but sleeping better than he had in years. Emily threw herself into planning the foundation, researching programs and interviewing potential staff, discovering a talent for administration she hadn't known she possessed. They visited Rome twice more, building tentative bridges with Sophia and Julia, sharing Sunday dinners with Lucia. The healing was slow and incomplete, marked by difficult conversations and occasional setbacks, but it was real, genuine, built on honesty rather than avoidance. Inez tried to cause trouble once more, selling a story to a tabloid about Dante's criminal past and her allegations of abuse. Dante's response surprised Emily. Instead of using his resources to suppress the story, he issued a statement acknowledging his past mistakes and his current efforts to build something better. The honesty disarmed the scandal before it could gain traction, and Inez faded back into obscurity with her vindictiveness exposed. On a cool evening in late January, almost a year after their first meeting, Dante led Emily to the garden at sunset. The caldera stretched before them in shades of amber and rose, the light painting everything golden. He'd been nervous all day, his usual control fractured by an anxiety she couldn't quite identify. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Emily's heart stuttered. "Dante, it's not what you think." "Well, it is, but—" He took a breath, steadying himself. "This past year with you has been the best year of my life. You've challenged me, supported me, loved me, despite having every reason not to. You've helped me become someone I can respect when I look in the mirror. You did that yourself." "No, I did it because you made me want to be worthy of you. Because you showed me that redemption was possible if I was willing to work for it." He opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple band of gold with a single diamond, elegant without being ostentatious. "I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. We both have more work to do, more healing to accomplish before we're ready for that." "Then what? I'm asking you to build a future with me, to stand beside me as we create something meaningful from all the brokenness, to be my partner in every sense of the word." He took the ring from the box. "This is a promise, Emily. A promise that I will spend every day trying to deserve you, that I will never stop working to become the man you believed I could be, that loving you will always be my first priority." Tears streamed down Emily's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the dying light. "You already deserve me. You've deserved me since the moment you chose honesty over easy comfort. Then say yes. Say you'll stay. That we'll build this life together, that a year from now we'll still be standing here watching the sunset and planning our future." "Yes. To all of it, yes." Dante pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a tenderness that still had the power to steal her breath. They stood wrapped in each other as the sun completed its descent, painting the sky in impossible colors, and Emily felt something settle in her chest that she'd been chasing for years without knowing it. Peace, purpose, home. "I love you," Dante murmured against her hair. "More than I thought I was capable of loving anything." "I love you too, even when you're difficult and complicated and impossible." "Especially then?" "Especially then." They returned to the house as stars began to appear overhead, the future stretching before them uncertain but promising. Emily thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, exhausted, invisible, running from a life that had never fit properly. That woman would never have believed this ending was possible, would never have imagined finding love in the arms of someone as broken and complicated as Dante Cavalli. But then again, she'd been equally broken in her own way. Maybe that was the secret. Finding someone whose fractures aligned with yours, whose sharp edges fit against your smooth surfaces to create something stronger than either person could have built alone. In bed that night, Dante held her close, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. The key pendant she still wore rested against her skin, a reminder of everything they'd survived to reach this moment. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. "That I finally understand what Marco meant about connections, about finding someone who makes you want to be better. He would have loved you, would have said I didn't deserve you, and then helped me figure out how to keep you anyway. I wish I could have met him." "Me too, but in a way, you have. Everything good I'm trying to become, that's Marco's influence, his belief in second chances, his faith that people could change. You're loving the version of me he always believed existed." Emily lifted her head to look at him. "No. I'm loving the version of you that chose to honor his memory by actually changing. That's all you, Dante. You did the work." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth, each touch a wordless expression of gratitude and love and promises yet to be spoken. When they finally settled into sleep, tangled together in the massive bed with the sound of the wind and the sea beyond the windows, Emily felt completely, perfectly at peace. She'd come to Santorini searching for something she couldn't name, running from a life that had suffocated her. She'd found danger and deception and a man whose darkness had initially terrified her. But she'd also found purpose, partnership, and a love strong enough to survive the truth. The ring on her finger caught the moonlight as she drifted towards sleep, a symbol of promises made and futures still being written. Somewhere in Rome, Lucia probably slept with Marco's photograph on her nightstand, her grief still sharp, but softened by the knowledge that her son was finally becoming the man his brother had believed he could be. Sophia tucked Julia into bed with stories about her father, slowly allowing space for the uncle who was trying to earn his way back into their lives. And here in Santorini, in a fortress built to keep the world out, Emily Carter and Dante Cavalli built something stronger than walls could ever provide. They built trust from honesty, love from vulnerability, a future from the ashes of past mistakes. It wasn't perfect. It would never be simple or easy or without complications, but it was real, fierce, and utterly theirs. And that, Emily thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was worth every risk she'd taken to find it.